Hello everyone and welcome back. This is part 2. We spent in the previous video like 20 minutes trying to download this DaVinci and spending some time in the project manager, but we're not in a hurry. We're not gonna cut corners. If you're interested in something really quick, real basic, you can find a crash course online that is going to show you like the basics. But in my experience, when you learn DaVinci or any other program for the matter, for that matter, you're gonna miss a lot of stuff and you're gonna return and relearn all of that from the scratch, from the beginning. So it is not really a good way to learn all of that. And the official documentation that Blackmagic presents to you about DaVinci contains like 3,500 pages. So as you can imagine, it will take a lot of time. But it is in my opinion, the right way to learn all of that. So we're gonna continue slowly. So this video is dedicated to settings. There are like 3 different categories of settings that are located in different parts of DaVinci. And yeah, we're gonna discuss all of them. Which one do you need? Which one you do not really need? Which one you have to enable? All of that. Okay, let's get going. DaVinci is open. The left corner, top corner, DaVinci Resolve. Preferences. This is the first type of settings that we're going to discuss today. And there are 2 types of preferences in here, the system preferences and user preferences. If you change something in the system preferences, you're going to need to restart DaVinci for it to take effect. And if you change something in user preferences, just going to save it and you can continue working. Okay? Yeah. Again, something wrong with my nose. Okay, let's get started. System memory. Limit resolve memory usage to and fusion memory cache to. Automatically, by default, DaVinci will take 75% of your memory, gonna use it for memory usage. Limit resolve memory usage. The rest will be used by fusion memory cache. I do not suggest reducing any of those because I've got like 64 gigs of RAM of memory, and quite often this is not enough. So I would suggest just leave as it is, because reducing any type of memory will not result in anything that is good. GPU configuration, GPU processing mode, you can leave it in auto, but if you want, you can disable it and choose for yourself. CUDA is used for NVIDIA graphics card, OpenCL is used for AMD. There is also like metal ones, those are used in Apple devices. I'm gonna leave it just in auto and DaVinci will use CUDA all the time. And GPU selection, it is set in auto. I've got only one graphics card, which is NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 Ti, as you can see in here. But if you've got like 2 of those and one is really inferior to the other, and in the other it's really powerful one, you can select it manually. So DaVinci would use the one that you selected. For example, you're using an external graphics card connected to your laptop. In that case, you're gonna need to select the external graphics card manually. Yeah, let's move to media storage. This is where the storage will be. Yeah, obvious. Try to select and to use the fastest that you've got. If you got SSD, select that one, because it will take time to move data to hard drive, to move it back. It's going to slow your process, and you would think that the problem is in like graphics card or your processor, but the problem can be right in here in your storage. Now I would change nothing in here. If your SSD is already selected, just leave it as it is. Decoding options, be sure to check these 4 options if they are not checked. Use GPU for Blackmagic raw decode. Decode H264, 265 using hardware acceleration. NVIDIA. Use easy DCP decoder, otherwise it would use just DCP decoder, which is slower. Just check all of those, and if you have them, because you may not have all of those, and just leave it as it is. It's going to expedite the process of editing and all of that. Video and audio. Well, I've got to have a separate monitor, a separate device, capture device, monitor device. I do not have neither of those. And also, like, to change immersive audio, I do really have to have the hardware, like Dolby Atmos or Aura 3D. I have to understand what the hell I'm doing here and to have the hardware in here. That's why I'm not going to cover any of those. So, because I do not have the hardware, I have no idea how to use it because I've never used it. I've got only one monitor, one PC, so sorry. Video plugins. If you have any video plugins installed, they will be available in here. You can enable and disable them. As you can see, I have none of those. That's why we can move to audio plugins. I have some of those. VST effects. This is the directory where those plugins are. I have to add or remove them depending on what I really want. And this window will show me available plugins. Once I've added them in here, I will see the list. As you can see, I've got like audio plugins like Nectar, like RX7 to reduce some like mouth declick, spectral denoise, or any other stuff. You can find online and add audio plugins as much as you want. And if you have an external audio processor, you can add it in here. For example, you've got a separate device that is going to process your audio. You can connect it and add it in here. So the audio processing will be happening otherwise, not in here. Control panels. As you can see, or maybe you cannot see, but I do not have a control panel. Those are expensive. They're going to expedite your work, of course, but they are expensive. I do not really need them right now. That's why I do not have them. Let's move to general. General. And right in here, I've got only two things enabled. Automatically check for updates and automatically opt in for new beta program notifications. DaVinci Resolve will check for new updates like version 17.1, 17.2. Now it is 18, but 18 is in beta. And if you're in the version 17, it's not going to show you that the version 18 beta is available, because if you do not check this one, this parameter. But if you check this one, it's going to show you that the new beta is available. You can download it. But again, if you have a very important project, you either back it up or you do not download beta, because beta will be full of like bugs, mistakes. So they will be fixed, yeah, but they can just stop your process, just ruin your project. You do not really want that. So upgrade to a beta once your important project is done. Now, internet accounts. You can tie any internet account that you want: YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, Dropbox, Frame.io. I just connected it to YouTube. Why? Why do you really need any of those? These are here to be able to export any of your video directly to your account, to your YouTube, to your Vimeo. This is not really the way I prefer to do that, but you can do that if you want. Advanced settings. As you can see, there is nothing in here, so you cannot really change anything. Let's go to user settings. First of all, you can save any of your preferences in here. Save user preferences, just call it like your name. If you are not the one who's using this software, you and the second, the third person, you're gonna have different preferences, and you can enable your preferences once you are in DaVinci Resolve. You can change all of that very quickly. So, primary language or just language, English. You can enable that, reload last working project when logging in. Once you're logged in, your last project will be reloaded. Pretty simple. Show focus indicators, use gray background for user interface. Some color graders, some people, color graders, are they called color graders? Not, doesn't really matter. People who color grade footage, as you can see, the background of this software is not like desaturated gray. It is like, it has bluish tint to it. So if you're like disturbed by that somehow, if this is a distraction to you, you can use gray background for user interface. Use gray background in viewers is enabled by default, and resize image to viewer to square pixels is enabled by default too. Some SD footage, they have it has like not square pixels, but like not square. So you need to enable that to make it look good, I guess. Delay viewer display by the number of frames. If you have a separate viewer device, like separate monitor, and the cable that is going from your computer to that separate device is going to slow, it's going to take some time. So for signal to go to there, depending on the type of cable, depending on the type of the connection. So you can delay your playback, so your audio coming from your speakers and the video coming from that viewer device will be in sync. This is why you can use this display viewer display by number of delay view display by number of frames. And the last two, this one for example, the last one, stop render when a frame or clip cannot be processed, will be enabled by default. I disabled it. And also there is this category, stop playback when a dropped frame is detected. First of all, if you enable that, playback will be almost completely impossible because frames almost always drop. If you use like 4K, 6K footage and your computer is not like super powerful, even if it is powerful at some effects, color grading, it's going to drop some frames. That's just inevitable. And stop renders when a frame or clip cannot be processed. It used to be enabled in here, and once you start a render, in DaVinci has its problems. So it is often going to crash if you're trying to render like 4K transitions between clips. And this way, the render will just stop. Sometimes it can go through that phase without like a significant damage. It can render partially your transition, it can skip your transition, and if you can live without that transition for your video, then you would not sacrifice the whole video just for that transition. So I just disabled that because I would rather watch this video once again and see for myself what's wrong, rather than to trust the computer, the software, to decide whether you just stop the render or just continue the render. So I disabled it. Project save and load. We've discussed it in the previous video, live save. Once the change is done in the software is going to save it incrementally, automatically. You do not need to worry about any of that. You just work and forget about saving. And project backups, which can be engaged separately from live save. They are going to perform backups every like minutes, hours, or days. As I remember correctly, for minutes it's going to perform like 7 or 8 backups, and then it's going to rewrite the first backup. For days it's like 5 days, and for hours something in between, like 5 to 7. So beware that it's not going to be like indefinitely piling up on your hard drive. It's going to rewrite the previous backups. Okay, so if you're really worried about that, and you have to set where your backups will be, and then in the project manager, right click on your project and just open backups, and backups will be opened separately, so they are not going to affect your current project. Whew, that's a lot to talk about. So editing in here, I would not really touch any of those, but maybe only automatic smart bins. Later in the media page, DaVinci Resolve can create smart bins automatically, and the way they are going to create them you determine in here though. So they can create smart bins for keywords, for people metadata, for shot metadata, for scene metadata. If you have the same scene metadata, they're going to create smart bins if you enable it in here. The duration of different transitions of generators, I would just leave it as it is. At the end of all of that, default fades. So you can determine what shape your fade in, fade out is going to have, whether it is linear, like in here by default, or whether it is a S shape, bell curve, or any of those. Oops. Equal power or none. Doesn't matter. Color. Color. This thing that is enabled, why perhaps when viewing reference stills, in the color page, if you have a still and you move it to left or to right, it's going to hit against the edge of the screen. But if this thing is enabled, it's going to wrap around and probably come from different, no, just wrap around, just go beyond the screen. Don't really know how important that to you, but it's enabled. Okay, high visibility power window, matters display high contrast black and white. Next in switches to visible track, not really that important. Previous or next node navigates only to correctors. This is not important. Yeah, the important thing. Switching clips. When you switch from one clip to the other clip in your color page, here you determine to which node you're gonna go. So it automatically goes to a certain node, and it here by default select last adjusted node. But if you are not like satisfied with that decision, you can select first node, last node, same node. It's up to you. Also, what we got here, printer light step calibration. For the people who are following these tutorials from a laptop, this is not really great news because you're gonna need a numpad for printer lights. Printer lights, basically you're gonna add or subtract certain colors by pressing numbers on a numpad. And the amount that will be added or subtracted is defined in here. If you want to change that, if you want to decrease or increase it, you can determine all of that in here. Now, Fairlight, nothing, I would touch nothing, but general settings, loop, jog alignment, and loop jog width. When you move your playhead in your Fairlight over your music, over your sound, it's going to pick like portions of the sound, so you can easily determine where you are right now, whether it is a dialogue, whether it is a music, and the number of those peaks from those sounds will be determined in here, 500 milliseconds. So if this is useful to you, change it to whatever you want. Now, playback settings. If your computer is not really good to play back, especially in the color page, where you've got power windows, you've got some selections, you can choose to enable hide UI overlays. This way, when you press playback, those overlays will be hidden, and then they will reappear again once you stop your playback. It may help your computer to work. It may help your computer work faster. Yeah. Minimize interface updates during playback also can facilitate. And performance mode, you can organize them the way you want. Enable, disable, I'll just leave it in automatic mode. Control panels, again, I do not have one. And metadata, you can determine what metadata will be saved manually. I would just leave it as it is again. So we are done with like preferences. It took some time, but we are done. Once you want to save something, you click save. I do not really want. I click cancel. Now let's get to keyboard customization. This is your keyboard, all right? And you can customize it the way you want. First of all, for people coming from different like software, from Adobe Premiere, from Final Cut, from Avid Media Composer, whatever it is, I have no idea. You can select presets from those programs, and you're gonna have the same keyboard shortcuts like in Adobe Premiere, like in Final Cut Pro, or you can select DaVinci Resolve. As you can see, I've got my own preset that you can actually, in here, you can save a new preset, import preset, whatever you want. What did I change in here? So I had to save a separate preset. For example, C I've got for Razer, W for end to playhead, Q to start playhead, and E to extract current node, extend edit. It's going to make sense once we get to edit page. So far, it's not making a lot of sense. Also, if you enable Alt or Control, you're gonna see all the shortcuts that will happen once you click Control and that button. You can find all of them in these categories, or if you know the exact name, you can search it in here, and also you can change it to whatever key you want. Okay? So this is pretty basic stuff. Every software I got, I think, has something similar. Okay, now let's get to the fun stuff. Probably my face is covering this right area where there are only two symbols. Right bottom corner, there is symbol, a small house, which is Project Manager, as you probably remember, and right to it is a little gear. Click on that gear, and we're gonna open Project Settings. This is the most important settings in DaVinci because they are about your project. Again, new feature from DaVinci Resolve 18, we can set current settings as default preset. We couldn't really do it before. And presets. We're going to start with presets. As you can see, there are 3 of those. They are here by default. And my initial idea was to save a new preset. Well, to change everything. I want to be changing here and save it as a new preset, but it's not the way it works in DaVinci. First of all, you need to select a preset, like current project, doesn't really matter, save as, come up with a name, and it's going to appear up here and will be selected. Then you change all the settings the way you want, then return to presets and save your settings to this new preset. This is the way it works. A little bit counterintuitive, but you need to know that, excuse me, you need to know that to correctly save all of those things. So, master settings, timeline resolution. For the love of God, do not select something like 4K or 8K. If you are in the free version, you wouldn't be able to click like 8K or export in 8K. I do not really remember. But do not choose 4K and try to color grade and to work in that timeline resolution, because even on the most powerful machines, 4K will be very laggy once you start color grading, once you start adding some effects. It's going to be very difficult. Fortunately, in DaVinci, you can set it like 1080. And right before export, you can change it to whatever you wish, like to 4K, 8K, and then export this footage in 4K or any other type of resolution. If you cannot find the resolution that you want, you can type it manually in here, like 3440, 1440, you can type anything you want it to. Pixel aspect ratio, square, cinemascope. Yeah, choose whatever you want. I would leave just in square. Timeline frame rate, choose. Ideally, you need to choose that before importing any footage. But if you import first footage of the project and the timeline frame rate is different from timeline frame rate, for example, you import in a footage that got 30 frames per second into this timeline that's got 24 frames per second. DaVinci will ask you, do you want to change your timeline frames to 30 frames per second? And you click OK. But once you import all other footage, like with 120 FPS, with 60 FPS, it's not going to bother to ask you. So you need to determine what kind of frame rate do you really need. Playback typically is going to match the timeline frame rate. But sometimes you've got like different monitors that are going to react differently to different time frames. So you can change playback frame rate, but I wouldn't suggest that. Now, video monitoring, probably the same. It's going to be the same as timeline resolution, timeline, all of that. These things do not really change them, because, yeah, they They need to be changed only if you're a professional, you know what you're doing, and you know exactly your configuration, you know your equipment, then you can change it. Otherwise, just do not touch it. Video bit depth, 8-bit, 10-bit, what to choose? 8-bit will be faster and easier on your processor. 10-bit will be more accurate without, for example, if I upload 12-bit footage and choose video monitor in 8-bit, it will be easier on the machine, but will create some banding that are not there actually. Do you get what I'm saying? So the banding, I will show you what the banding is later when we get to calibrating 8-bit footage. But I chose to leave 10-bit in here. It's a little bit harder on a machine, but it will get me a more accurate image. Optimized media render cache. You can determine all of the formats that you want your media render or optimized media. Optimized media is basically creating a copy of your original media, so your computer, for your computer it is easier to process, like half the resolution, quarter the resolution. In my case it is DNxR and compressed 10-bit. You can change it to H.265, you can change it to uncompressed 16-bit float if you want, whatever you wish, whatever you really need for the project. Working folders, you can determine all of this for cache, for proxy generation, for gallery stills, and frame interpolation. You can, nearest is the easiest one. Optical flow is going to be very hard in your machine, so choose whatever you want. Image scaling, sharper. Sharper will give you the best results when you're scaling up and down the image. For example, the image is smaller and you want to stretch it to the size of your monitor, or the image is like you need to just have this video in the corner of your monitor. This is called image scaling. Sharper is going to give you the best results. Now, this parameter, input scaling, we're gonna get to that once we get to edit. By default, it is set to scale entire image to fit, but we will change that once we get to edit, because sometimes we need an like cinematic ultra wide image, and in this case we're gonna change that, and I'll show you how to do that later. Color management. Color management, I'm not going to talk about that right now, because a whole separate long video will be dedicated to color management, because we've got different color spaces: ACES, DaVinci RGB, Color Manage RGB, HDR, SDR. It's going to be exported in Rec 709, Rec 2020. What is the difference? We're gonna talk about all of that in this separate video, so just leave it as it is. You're probably gonna find that your parameter is in DaVinci RGB. Leave it, do not touch it. Once we get to color grading, I'll explain everything in here. Now, general options. Basically, I read today from the official documentation all of the parameters in here, and half of that doesn't really make sense. So general option, I would just not touch it if you have no idea what you're doing. Camera raw, this is a totally different, separate topic again, because you're gonna determine what kind of raw DaVinci will do what to that. For example, you import Alexa footage and it's going to apply certain things to this particular raw. Do not touch it. If you are not working with like hours and hours of Alexa footage and you want the same project settings for them, do not really touch it. Capture and playback. Capture and playback is for importing on tape. Yeah, this is for tape. I do not have neither device that is able to relay my video on tape, nor the desire to have any of that, so I'm not gonna touch any of that. Subtitles. Maximum characters per line, maximum caption, change, experiment if you're really into this. Fairlight, audio sample rate, and loudness scale. Target loudness low -23, which is LUFS, which is standard, but in every country those standards may be a little bit different. If you're working for a certain TV commercial that is going to be released on a certain TV channel, ask them target loudness level, but standard is -23 LUFS. Path mapping, nothing in here. You do not really need that. Not in the beginner area, definitely not. So we are finally done with those settings. Finally, we can now go to media page, and it is going to happen in the next video. But we had to go through all of this, because, for example, you need to know how to save a preset. You need to know, if you come from like Adobe Premiere, that you can enable keyboard shortcuts that are very similar, that are the same that in the Premiere Pro. You needed to engage all the things in here, like media decode options, so your machine will be working faster and easier. You needed to do all of that before you really start working in here. So we finally have done all of the preparation for finally working with some footage and importing some footage in here. So the next video will be all about media page. I will explain everything that is happening in here, how to import footage, create bins, how to work with all of that. So I'm gonna see you in the next video. Thank you for being here. Bye.